Hey, welcome to Church Online. We're so glad that you're watching us today. Man, we are getting excited about our regathering together. And so we're going to be coming back on Sunday, September 13th, 9:30 a.m. We can't wait to see some of you in person. We also recognize some of you may not be comfortable just yet, so we will continue to offer our online experience as well. But those that do feel comfortable, we look forward to seeing you collectively together here at Crosspoint. Now, I have a question that I want to ask you today. Have you ever used this expression, hey, I've got to draw a line? You know, maybe your parents, the kid's grandparents, bought your child a drum set, and it's been a long day. You feel like a headache coming on. You're a little cranky, and he wants to play the drum set, and you're like, hey, I've got to draw a line. Like, no. Or maybe you've had this happen before when you pay for the warranty, you pay the additional money, and then you have a problem with the product, and now all of a sudden they're telling you that they can't take it back, and you're like, hey, listen, I need to draw the line. Like, no. Or maybe for some of you, have you ever asked this question like, hey, I need to talk to your manager? Or maybe you're on the phone, it's like, hey, I need to talk to your boss right now. It's like I'm drawing the line. If you've ever done that, they have an expression for you today where they call you a Karen. Now, if your name is Karen, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm sure this isn't you. You can just kind of blame the Gen Z crowd for calling you a Karen. But if you blame them, they'll probably turn around and call you a Karen for complaining them anyways. But today, we're talking about drawing a line. It's, do we have the conviction to draw a line to say, enough is enough? I was at the gym this past week, and I've been going to this gym here in Yorba Linda called Fanatics, and one of my good friends, Vadik Hawkins, owned the gym, and I found out that he put everything outside, which is kind of cool. It's like Venice Beach here in our neck of the woods. And while I'm there, I get there early and I put all my stuff, my towel, I put my phone, I put my headphones, everything on the treadmill. And then I go into the gym, I go and I check in, had to use the restroom, come back out, and there's a guy who's on the treadmill. Now there's only one treadmill outside. So I go up to the guy and I'm like, hey, listen, have you seen my towel and my headphones and my phone and all the stuff that was right here on the treadmill? And he says, yeah, I got tired of waiting. I set it over there. And at that moment, I wasn't quite sure how to react because I don't want to be like a doormat that just gets walked on. But at the same time, I'm like, hold on, I'm a pastor. Like, I can't like go off on this guy, but do I draw the line here? And I just kind of said, hey, let me know when you're going to get off. And it was interesting because this other guy who I just met a few days later but was there watching the whole scene, his name is Ping. And Ping came up to me and he said, hey, I saw how you dealt with that guy. I thought that you handled that really, really well. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I forget people are watching. It's like, I don't always know, like, am I going to draw a line in the sand? Is this it? Is this like a time where we're saying, no, enough is enough? Because I want to be careful. But also at the same time, I don't want to be a doormat. I don't want to get walked on. So we're talking today about some guys that drew a line in the sand and said, enough is enough. We're in this series called Thriving in Babylon. It's a study of the book of Daniel. And just to give you some context, this happened 2,600 years ago. There was a world power, a superpower, which was Babylon. And it was led by King Nebuchadnezzar. And he just kept conquering country after country after country until everyone knew about Babylon. And he conquered this little country called Judah. And when he conquered Judah, he went on a mission to find the brightest, the youngest, the who's who of Judah. But he had this goal to brainwash these 4 guys. And he wanted to brainwash them into Babylonian culture. His whole desire was them to act like Babylonians, and so he was going to raise them up, give them an opportunity. They were elite. He was going to put them in leadership, but first he had to clear them of all their Christianity, of all of their beliefs in the true God. So what he did is he brought them along. Their names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he started brainwashing them into Babylonian culture. And if they disobeyed, then they should have died. But the unthinkable happens. All four of them had courageous faith. And they didn't turn from going God's way. They kept their faith. They flourished. And this is the story of the book of Daniel. But they also kept their convictions, but at the same time, they didn't turn people off either. They didn't go on a rant. Basically, they learned how to have God's blessing on their life and how to thrive in a culture that was no longer a Christian culture. How to thrive in Babylon. That's the story of the book of Daniel. Is how can you bless a city that's not designed to bless you? Now, last week we studied Daniel chapter 3, and we learned about King Nebuchadnezzar. And King Nebuchadnezzar, he created this 90-foot statue of himself. Many theologians believe it was of himself. And he called everyone that was on the payroll to come in, thousands of people at the right time. And he hired an orchestra. He put on almost like this Olympic, opening ceremonies pageantry. And he says, when you hear the music, I want you to bow down and worship me. Now, if you don't, he says, I'm going to throw you into the furnace. I'm going to toss you in. So thousands of people, they all gather around this statue. I mean, the music starts, the crowd starts moving. And this was the moment for the king, because he had waited his entire life for this moment right here. Do you know how many other kings he had to outsmart to become the king of Babylon? Do you know how many battle meetings he had to sit in and strategically think through of how to conquer this other country? And it all led to this moment. Here he is, King Nebuchadnezzar, his 90-foot statue. People are going to bow down to him. And the people started moving, and thousands of them started bowing down when they heard the music. Have you ever been on stage and everyone applauds for you? Have you ever had that moment? That's probably what King Nebuchadnezzar felt like at that moment. It was intoxicating to King Nebuchadnezzar. But then something happened. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 8. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 8 says, but some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. Now, Babylonia was a multi-ethnic country, and they definitely saw race, they saw the Jews. And the response of these three guys, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, would have a great impact on how the whole city would see their people group. Now, I want you to look at verse 9. It says, they said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, long live the king. You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments. That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be, catch this, must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, king, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods. They drew a line in the sand. They said, enough is enough. And they do not worship the gold statue that you have set up. Now, you have to understand that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they weren't scrubs. Listen, these were high-ranking officials. They were the best of the best from Judah. They had went through this whole brainwashing procedure, but there came this point in time where they drew a line in the sand, and they knew that it would cost them. It may cost them their life. It may cost them comfort. It could cost them, the wealth, a future placement. And it definitely was going to affect everyone else that was there as well, because the king was going to be upset. When he's angry, everyone feels the wrath of that. So the question that I have for you today is this: where do you draw the line? Do you have some convictions? Do you have a backbone? Is there a time when you say, enough is enough? Now, we all have limitations. I mean, we all only have so much money. You only have so much time. You only have so much energy. And those that do not have any limitations, you are called MasterCard's dream client. Listen, you're the dream customer for MasterCard. And some of you have faced the wrath of too much credit card spending because you didn't have any self-limitations. Listen, we all have limitations. You only have so much money, so much time, so much energy. I have this phrase that I love to use that I tell myself, I've taught it here at Crosspoint, where I challenge you to say yes to the best and no to the rest. And you've got to ask yourself this question: whatever it is that's in front of you, is this a good thing or is this a God thing? Because oftentimes, good opportunities and good things can be the enemy of God things. It's not always choosing what's right and wrong. Sometimes it's choosing best over good. So you got to say yes to the best and no to the rest. So for instance, I said yes to my wife, Shannon. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. But when I said yes to Shannon, I said no to every other woman. And if I said yes to any other woman, Shannon would say a big no back to me. Listen, you've got to say yes to the best and no to the rest. You know, if you're going to say yes to your family and yes to your kids, that may require that you simultaneously say no to a job opportunity, job advancement in the future. Listen, if you're going to say yes to getting out of debt, that may mean you have to say no to eating out. If you're going to say yes to working out, then you may have to say no to Netflix binges at night. And if you're going to say, spiritually speaking, if you're going to say yes to Jesus, then that means that you're going to have to make a decision to say no to going the world's way. You see, the very first commandment that Moses gave, commandment number 1, have no other gods before me, is what God said. Listen, Moses came down with the 10 commandments, the very first one, have no other gods before me. And this is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their original names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they said, we're drawing a line in the sand. We will not worship. We will not bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar and his gold statue. We will only worship the true God. And by them saying yes to this, they were drawing a line in the sand, then it was going to cost them. Now, they didn't cross their fingers and say, well, you know what, we're going to bow down, but we're going to cross our fingers because we don't mean it. Or they didn't say, hey, we're going to bow our knee, but we're not bowing our heart. No, they said, we're drawing a line. We're going to follow God's way. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't become the king because he was soft. When he heard this report, he calls them in and he calls them out. But because he saw something in them, maybe it was their integrity, maybe it was their character, maybe there was something different about them, he immediately gives them a second chance to bow down. But listen to their response, verse 16. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace," now catch this, you don't want to miss this, "the God whom we serve is able to save us." So here's some courageous faith. God is able. God is bigger. God is more powerful than anything that we're facing, anything in front of us. No matter what you can do, no matter what is going on around me, God is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But then verse 8, this is interesting. It says, but even if he doesn't, go back to the slide before that. It says, but even if he doesn't. See, we have faith that he has the power to, he can. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue that you have set up. We are drawing a line in the sand. Let me ask you, do you have that kind of conviction to stand up for truth? To say, hey, I'm willing to be thrown into the fire? See, in King Nebuchadnezzar, he was not used to anyone showing any defiance. So he had a full gut reaction. And he said, throw him into the furnace, throw him into the fire, tie him up. And the guards that tied them up, that threw them into the fire was so hot, it killed the guards that threw them into the fire. And they said, listen, whatever it takes, throw us in. Throw us in. Let me ask you, do you have that kind of conviction that says, throw me in the fire? You know, for some of you, you are the opposite. You may have some convictions, but they're really not convictions. Maybe they're just preferences. You've got some preferences, but you're making them convictions. Maybe you're taking some of your preferences further than what God would have you take them. Let me give you a case in point. See, I find it very interesting that they changed their names. So, you know, their original names that they had, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, here's what their Hebrew names mean. God is gracious. Who is what God is? And God has helped us. Those were the original meaning of their names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But when they got to Babylon, they immediately changed their name. Remember, they were going to brainwash them into this new culture. So here's what their new names mean. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shadrach means inspired by the Babylonian god Aku. Meshach means belonging to the Babylonian god Aku. And Abednego means servant of the Babylonian god Nego. Now, here's the interesting thing. They changed their names from being these Hebrew godly names to their names now meaning servant of Babylonian gods. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't say, hey, don't call me that. I'm going to draw a line in the sand. No. They actually let them change their names. They said, listen, a name, that's a preference for me, not a conviction. Listen, the name, I know who my identity is. I know who I am in Christ. No matter what you call me, no matter what you say about me, and by the way, you're going to have a lot of people call you names and call you names that are not true, that you don't believe in. And listen, when other people call you names, you've got to dig yourself deep into knowing who God has called you to be, knowing your identity, that it is in Christ Jesus. And they said, listen, that's a preference, not a conviction. So I'm not going to go off on that. But the moment you ask me to worship another God, I'm drawing the line in the sand. Now, we don't talk about this very much in the church today. But the Bible over and over says there will be a cost whenever you decide to follow God. When you decide to go God's way, there's going to be a cost you have to pay. When you say yes to God and you say no to this world, there will be some consequences. But 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says, yes, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will suffer. Listen, you will have some suffering for being a follower of Jesus Christ. 1 Peter 4:12, it says, dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you're going through, as if something strange were happening to you. John said this in John chapter 15:18. If the world hates you, Jesus said, remember that it hated me first. Your yes to Jesus may mean a no to this world that may cost you. And when you have biblical principles, it may cost you relationally. It may cost you with your family. It may cost you at the workplace. It may cost you some of your comfort. Are you willing to suffer, knowing that you've got to draw a line in the sand because these are your biblical convictions? So Nebuchadnezzar said, throw them in the fire. So they threw them into the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar is looking inside of the furnace. And then all of a sudden, he leaps up and he asks the guys, he's like, hold on, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? Because I see 4. And the 4th one looks like the face of God. I was at the gym this week, same gym, I finally got on the treadmill. And when I'm on the treadmill, I've got this routine where I have my Bible, I have my prayer journal. And so I read through my prayer journal while I'm running, and I listen to some Christian music. And this song came on, and it was so perfect. It was a God thing, because I'm studying for this message today. And this song came on by Hillsong. And here's the lyrics of the song. There's another in the fire, standing next to me. See, that's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were in the fire, but they were not alone, because there was Jesus in the fire with them, standing next to them. Listen, there's a lot of people going through pain right now. I don't know what fire you're in right now, but I want to tell you that you are not alone in the fire, that God is with you. I love what it says in verse 24 and 25. It says, suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement. He explained to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men, throw them into the furnace? Yes, your majesty, we certainly did. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed. Listen, they're going on a walk. They're strolling around. They got a smile on their face. They're going through the fire saying, it's not going to burn us. It's unharmed. And the 4th looks like a god. Let me tell you what faith is. Faith is confidence that God can deliver you, and the peace if he doesn't. Remember what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to the king? They said, God is able to save us. Listen, we're not going to fear you. God is able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we're going to draw a line in the sand, and we refuse to worship any other god. Confidence is God can deliver you, but peace even if he doesn't. And listen, even if he doesn't, you will be delivered. You may be delivered from this earth. Listen, I don't know what we're going through right now. Maybe we're living in the last days. I don't know. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. No man knows the day or the hour, is what Jesus says. But I want to let you know that if we are living in the last days, as believers, we're going to suffer. We're going to go through some things. And I believe that it is important for us as followers of Jesus to have some convictions, to say, we're going to draw a line in the sand, and we're going to trust God. He can deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we're at peace with that. We're at peace with God, knowing that he will deliver us ultimately one day. You know, January 2nd, 1956, Ed McCauley, Roger Uterin, Nate Saint, Pete Fleming, and Jim Elliott, who were all missionaries. They were all tragically killed by this tribe in Ecuador. And they had spent 3 years communicating with this tribe that they were friendly. They had spent 3 years showering them with gifts. They had spent 3 years trying to build a relationship just so they could go there to the tribe, they could fly the little plane in, and that they could become friends and ultimately share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, so this tribe could become followers of Jesus Christ. But when those men's plane landed in that tribe, they were not met with smiles. They were met with spears. And that day, every single one of those men lost their lives. They were tragically murdered. But that's not the end of the story. Because 2 years later, Jim Elliot's wife, Elizabeth, and Nate Saint's sister, Rachel, went back to that same tribe. And they began living with those tribal members. And many of that tribe came to know Jesus Christ as their Lord, their Savior, the boss, the coach, and the CEO of their life. And those two women, they brought peace to that tribe. Listen, God will deliver. God can also take good and create good out of the bad. Maybe not in our generation, but we have confidence knowing that we trust God has the power to save us. But even if he doesn't, we have peace knowing that God is ultimately in control. Would you imagine with me just for a moment, what would it look like for you? What would it look like for the church to walk with the confidence of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the season and the time that we live in right now? What would it look like if we walked in faith knowing that God will deliver us? He's able to deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we're at peace with that. Listen, I want to challenge you with our core value of courageous faith. We have 4 values here at Crosspoint. These aren't just Crosspoint values. These should be your personal values. Teach them to your kids. Teach them to your grandkids. This one's called courageous faith. We say it like this. We are faith-filled, big thinking, bet the farm risk takers. We will never insult God with small thinking and safe living. And here's how you test this value in your life. What are you stepping in right now that if God doesn't show up, it's doomed to failure? See, because that's faith. Maybe you're stepping into a fire, and if God doesn't show up, you're going to get burned. I want to tell you that God is with you. Walk in courageous faith. If you've never put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, this is your moment right now. I want to ask you to pray this prayer. You can say it right now where you're at. Just say, Dear God, I'm asking you to forgive me of my sins and take full control of my life. Right now, I'm declaring you the boss, the coach, and the CEO of my life. Listen, if you prayed that prayer just now, I want to be the first to congratulate you and say, welcome to the family of God. And your faith journey, this isn't the end. This is the starting point. This is the beginning of your faith journey. And we want to help you. And so one of the ways we'll help you is we're going to send you a book. We're going to send you some next steps of what it means not just to find Jesus, but also follow Jesus. So if you'll text the number below, find and follow, we'll put that in the mail this week. And we want to help you in your spiritual journey. Listen, I want to challenge you right now to find a group. We've talked about groups. Man, groups are coming up in just a few weeks. So find a group online. Well, you can meet either online or in person. We've got several different groups. So find a group that fits for you. Make plans if you feel comfortable to be with us at our outdoor service on Sunday, September 13th. And then the next Sunday, September 20th, we're going to have a friend day, online friend day, as well as in-person friend day as well. We're going to have free in and out for everybody that shows up here at the church. We're going to have a great experience. Listen, you don't want to miss next week's message as we're going to Daniel chapter 4, and we're specifically talking about decision making, how to make wise choices and decisions. So I hope to see you next Sunday.